Hong Kong spared direct hit by powerful typhoon. The Usagi leaves trail of death and destruction across the border. And Angela Merkel wins another term as German Chancellor.
Good evening. Usagi has been blamed for the deaths of at least 25 people across the border as the typhoon wreaked havoc in southern China. Here in Hong Kong, the number 8 gale or storm signal was in effect for nearly 15 hours overnight and this morning. According to the hospital authority, there were 17 storm-related injuries. Ronnie Samtani begins our coverage.
The observatory had warned that Usagi would be the strongest typhoon to hit Hong Kong in years. It was the second time the number 8 signal had been in effect this year, and winds were coming in from the northwest as the storm approached. Some of the worst weather was seen in Ma On Shan. Just making the way across open areas was a bit of a challenge. When Usagi was closest to Hong Kong at around midnight, there was a change in the wind direction. Local winds turned southwesterly, bringing torrential rain to most parts of the territory. At an industrial building in Tuen Mun, a 50 by 5 meter metal structure collapsed onto parked vehicles. And a vehicle was trapped because of flooding in Lau Fau Shan. A couple had to be rescued by firefighters, but both people escaped unscathed. The observatory had also warned of unusually high tide. Low-lying areas in Lei Yu Mun were flooded because of rising sea levels. Huge waves lashed the shore, and efforts to protect properties there were largely in vain. In Tai O on Lantau, the water level was only half a meter below street level. Residents there were busy piling up sandbags. Authorities received 131 reports of fallen trees during the storm around town. In Tuen Mun, a tree blocked part of the light rail transit tracks near the Melody Garden station. Services were suspended as a result. Over on Hong Kong Island, the rain seemed non-stop in Western District. And as the night progressed, Usagi gradually weakened and moved away from Hong Kong. The strong wind signal number 3 replaced the number 8 signal at 9:20 a.m. So it was a big rush back to work.
Many of them were hoping to beat the traffic and started queuing up at the bus stops here in Hong Kong more than an hour before the number 8 signal was dropped.
I think I don't have any trouble because I live around here, so I just get a minibus to here and then get a bus to Wan Chai. So it's okay.
No difficulty, it's okay. So I'm ready to go to work.
The hospital authority said 17 people sought treatment at the accident and emergency units of public hospitals for various storm-related injuries. The observatory canceled all typhoon signals before 10:30 a.m. A sense of relief, perhaps, that the super typhoon did not cause any more damage as first feared. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
Well, Usagi has also disrupted air traffic. About 500 flights were cancelled or delayed because of the storm. More on that from Koti Nanwandi.
It was one long and frustrating night at Hong Kong International Airport for these people. Bottles of water and a few blankets from the airlines were the only consolation for what seemed like endless hours of waiting.
Really, I'm so tired about this. Tired from sitting also. Yeah, because I have my wife, she's pregnant and no place to take rest. Already she's in the floor. And until now, nothing nice to us, really.
We are supposed to be in the Philippines yesterday morning, but up to now, we are here.
Some of those stranded have been at the passenger terminal since yesterday morning. The waiting soon got the better of some of them. This group works for a company in Taiwan and was meant to be on their way back home yesterday afternoon. They demanded answers from the airline on when they would be able to get back to work and how they'd be compensated. Flights gradually resumed from noon onwards.
A little bit surprised, yeah. Yes, we were waiting for 7 hours yesterday. We expected worse today, but actually it's quite fluid, and their Dragonair is much more organized today, yeah.
I was expecting a bit of delay, but everything seems to be on time, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with the outcome.
With a backlog of passengers, airline carriers have opened up more check-in counters and increased ground staff to accommodate more passengers and to smoothen the process.
Cathay Pacific, for its part, says passengers without confirmed bookings or whose flights were cancelled should not go to the airport because the chance of securing a seat on standby is very low. But the airline is looking into operating additional flights and increasing capacity tomorrow to try to clear the backlog. Kirti Nandwani, TVB News.
Now, Hong Kong largely escaped the full force of Usagi, and experts say one reason for this was because it weakened just before hitting land. Vicky Kong has more.
Hong Kong had expected the worst from Usagi, but in the end the city was spared the full impact of the storm. A weather expert we spoke with today said this was because Usagi had already weakened when it hit land.
Once it made landfall, and the water supply or the water vapor supply would be cut off immediately. And we all know that for a typhoon, the main source of energy is the water vapor evaporated from the ocean. Since it's now over land, so this source of energy has been cut off.
Lee added that the mountains shielded the southern part of Hong Kong from Usagi, which landed to the north of the territory. He also mentioned that the storm's eye sucked in seasonal dry air from the mainland, which weakened the strength of wet air streams inside. Despite escaping the full fury of Usagi, authorities reminded people they should never underestimate a typhoon.
Experts also reminded citizens not to take typhoon preparation lightly, even if strong winds aren't felt at their homes. This is because wind directions always change as typhoons move, so non-windy places may become windy. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
Turning overseas now, Chancellor Angela Merkel has led her Conservatives to a clear victory in Germany's parliamentary elections. The result not only consolidates her position domestically, but also ensures her status as Europe's most powerful leader. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her supporters were all smiles as soon as it became clear her party had scored a decisive victory in federal elections for Germany's parliament. In a slight disappointment, her pro-business partners failed to make it into parliament despite riding on the Merkel ticket, falling short of the 5% of the vote needed to win seats. Which is why today, Merkel and top party officials met to talk strategy about reaching out to their centre-left rivals to form a government. Merkel's Christian Democratic Union bloc scored its best result in 23 years to put her on course for a third term as Germany's Chancellor. Her party won 41.5% of the vote and finished only 5 seats short of an absolute majority in the 630-member lower house. The Chancellor thanked supporters for their help. I would first of all like to thank the voters who have given the CDU such an outstanding amount of trust, said Merkel. I can promise the voters that we will act responsibly and carefully with it. Analysts say the result not only cements the Chancellor's position domestically, it also has implications in Europe, especially for those hit by the Eurozone crisis, who have come to resent Germany and Merkel's insistence on austerity.
There will be shockwaves sent to those countries in the south in particular that were hoping that a new coalition in Berlin might inject more of a social Europe, might inject more programs about investment and growth, and not only talking rules, which is at least what the perception is in many other parts of Europe.
Merkel looks likely to end up leading either a grand coalition government with the centre-left Social Democrats, a defeated challenger Peer Steinbrück, reviving a previous alliance, or, less likely, with the environmentalist Greens.
To Kenya now, where an unknown number of hostages are still being held by an al-Qaeda-linked terror group in a shopping mall in Nairobi. A short while ago, witnesses reported multiple explosions and gunfire at that scene. The death toll in this massacre has now risen to at least 68. 3 days into the standoff, and people there remain terrified, saying so many of their family members are still unaccounted for. New video from inside the Westgate shopping mall shows that terrifying moment when gunmen burst into the mall and began shooting at anyone moving. Shoppers are seen fleeing for their lives or crouching and hiding as terrorists move from store to store, shooting at random people. On the heels of complaints the government is taking too long to overtake the terrorists, the president of Kenya called for calm.
Our multi-agency response unit has had to delicately balance the pressure to contain the criminals with the need to keep our people still held in the building safe.
But even today, bursts of gunfire and the sound of grenade blasts blared out of the mall. While Kenyan Defense Forces, or KDF, have taken control of most of the building, a military spokesman believes 10 attackers are still holed up in various areas of the mall.
They are in different parts of the building, but most areas of the building are now in the control of the KDF.
Helicopters patrolling the skies above signaled Kenyan authorities are strategizing how to neutralize the gunmen. U.S. President Barack Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry offered help and condemned the attack.
It represents the seriousness and the breadth of the challenge that we face with ruthless and completely reckless terrorists.
In an effort to show al-Qaeda and its affiliates are still very powerful, al-Shabaab made clear this attack is punishment for Kenya's intervention in Somalia.
And welcome back. A mainland official here in Hong Kong has attacked the idea of a public nomination for candidates in the 2017 chief executive election. But as Evelyn Leung reports, the Occupy Central movement insists that should not be ruled out.
Hao Tie-chuan, publicity director of the central government's liaison office, today published another newspaper article to criticize Occupy Central. In an article last week, he wrote that the campaign would lead to chaos in Hong Kong. This time, Hao made clear the idea of public nomination had not been accepted by those who drafted the Basic Law before the handover. That's why it wasn't included in Hong Kong's mini-constitution. He hopes Hong Kong will be able to move towards universal suffrage in accordance with the Basic Law, rather than going backward.
Responding to the Beijing officials' comments, the organizers of Occupy Central said they are open-minded.
But they stress public nomination shouldn't be ruled out.
At this moment, we believe that the popular nomination is one of the methods which can truly meet the international standard of universal suffrage by avoiding any unreasonable barrier for people coming from different political views to join the elections. So we believe that we shouldn't exclude this option at this moment. Of course, we understand that there are other options that will also meet the international standard. But we don't think that we should exclude it at this moment.
Organizers of the campaign also pointed out that when the Basic Law was being drafted, there was little discussion back then on details of how to achieve universal suffrage. Public nomination would allow candidates who manage to secure a certain number of nominations to run in the CE election. Meanwhile, the second deliberation day of the Occupy Central movement will be held between October and December. Various groups will discuss the principles of universal suffrage. Around 3,000 people are expected to attend. Evelyn Leung, TVB News.
Manufacturing on the mainland has risen to a 6-month high in another sign that the world's second biggest economy is recovering from a prolonged slowdown. The preliminary version of HSBC's Purchasing Managers Index, which was released today, climbed to 51.2 this month from 50.1 in August. Numbers above 50 indicate that an expansion is underway. The survey is another encouraging sign for the country's leaders as they try to reverse a slowdown that dragged down GDP growth to 7.5% in the second quarter. Today's data added to other recent indicators, including improved trade, factory output and auto sales, that suggests the slowdown is leveling out.
Over to Cambodia, where the opposition boycotted the opening of the country's parliament today in protest at allegations of widespread cheating during July's elections. Empty seats dotted the National Assembly as 55 lawmakers elected from the opposition were absent. 68 ruling party lawmakers did attend the session. Heavy security surrounded the parliament following weeks of protests by opposition supporters. July's election results ensured Prime Minister Hun Sen would continue with his nearly 30 years as head of Cambodia's government.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says he's not worried about a draft resolution being submitted to the United Nations Security Council, which would force Damascus to surrender its stockpile of chemical weapons. In an interview with China's state broadcaster CCTV, Assad said Syria has always honored the international treaties it signed. Assad also criticized the US, Britain and France, saying they are fighting an imaginary enemy. Under a US-Russia deal agreed to earlier this month, Assad's government must account for its stockpile of chemical weapons and see them destroyed by the middle of next year.
U.S. President Barack Obama has once again lamented the difficulty in implementing tougher gun control measures. His comments came during a memorial service for the victims of the Washington Navy Yard shooting last week.
But the politics are difficult, as we saw again this spring. And that's sometimes where the resignation comes from, the sense that our politics are frozen and that nothing will change. Well, I cannot accept that. I do not accept that we cannot find a common sense way to preserve our traditions, including our basic Second Amendment freedoms and the rights of law-abiding gun owners, while at the same time reducing the gun violence that unleashes so much mayhem on a regular basis.
The National Rifle Association, which lobbies for gun rights, responded to the shooting by calling for greater efforts to identify and lock up mentally ill people who are dangerous. The gunman, Aaron Alexis, is said to have been mentally ill. And that's our news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.